Cool. Are we live? Yeah. Fantastic. Hey everybody, welcome to Hack Night number 700. I don't know how many of these we've done, dozens of them. Welcome. It's great to see you all here. How many of you, this is your first weekly Hack Night? Anyone? Just Angie. Wow. So it's all regulars. Do we all know one another's names? Should we do an icebreaker anyway? All right, yeah, we'll do an icebreaker anyway. All right, so we're going to go around the room. We're going to say our name. We're going to say what we do for a living, whatever you want to say. It doesn't have to be your job title. It can be what you do for a living. And well, Neeraj and I were working earlier at a coffee shop nearby, and they were filming a movie. So you should say what your favorite Texas movie that was filmed in Texas is.
Oh, good God.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to think of that by the time they get to me.
Yes, you can. I believe in you. When in doubt, just say terms of endearment. You know.
Does it have to be a movie?
Does not have to be a movie. Any other questions? All right. So my name is Jeff. I write code for a living, for the most part. My favorite movie filmed in Texas is RoboCop 2.
I'm Neeraj. I run a nonprofit that teaches code to kids. And my favorite Texas movie, definitely No Country for Old Men.
It's a good one.
I'm Tyler. I work on various things, I guess. And my favorite Texas filmed movie and series, probably Friday Night Lights.
It's a good one.
Harold, I work in IT, consulting, and my favorite movie is Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay.
Jennifer, I don't work at all this year. I'll work next year. And my favorite movie, I guess it was filmed in Texas, was Rob Zombie's Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay. All right.
Hey, I'm Nathan. I do data science stuff, and favorite Texas movie is Dazed and Confused.
It's a good one.
I'm Tiffany. I'm a GIS developer. I had no idea where the movies are filmed, so.
Could say Rushmore. It's always a safe bet.
I missed that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ruining it for other people. How about we go around the back and sneak through? Michelle?
Okay, I'm Michelle Price. I run Startup Grind and Pitch a Kid. And while I don't know a Texas movie, the last movie I just saw, which was last night, that was premiered, is Wind River. And it was the most powerful movie I've seen in a long time, and I see it a lot.
Nice. 2 thumbs up from Michelle Price.
Yeah.
Wind
Awesome.
River?
Wind River.
I'm Michelle Farrell. I do UI UX design at startups, and also like Michelle Price, run the Hackster.io for Houston and ABI technology group for Houston. I think it's a split between boyhood in terms of endearment.
Nice.
I'm Gina Knott. I'm a student at Rice. I don't think people are looking at it. I have to say Tree of Life.
Cool.
Parents House.
Nice.
Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Leffler, and I've been working in the energy industry. And I saw a new Texas movie about a month ago that the guy was like super pumped to show me. It was like a college humor movie called Everybody Wants Some. And if you're from Texas, or from Houston, you may recognize some of the points around in the movie.
Cool.
My name is Daniel Marker. I'm assistant engineer for Schlumberger. Favorite Texas movie, probably the only Texas movie that I made is Disney's Davy Crockett.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Robin Moskowitz. I also write code for a living. I also don't know any Texas movies. I'm not a big movie person, and I definitely wouldn't tell you movies from Texas.
Does anybody want to volunteer one for Robin? Second favorite Texas movie? No one?
We're having a hard time, to be honest.
All right.
I'm several suggestions so far.
Okay. Rachel?
My name is Rachel Green. I like to teach, although I don't do that for a living, but it's something I do occasionally, and I like it. I don't have like a favorite Texas movie I can sum up the movie I just saw though.
Sure.
So I saw Girls Night on, sorry, not girls, like girls trip Saturday. It was everything I thought it would be and more. Yeah, you kind of just have to like watch it and then you're like,
Appropriate for the night, women.
wow.
Nice.
Yes, there were good health tips. Besides the whole, you know, like weed and yeah, don't do that. But other tips were good for your mental and spiritual health.
I'm Meredith Maines. I am in software design and oil and gas. And since Jeff already said Rushmore,
I'm sorry.
it's okay. I'm gonna go off script since I'm from Louisiana. I'm gonna instead give a Louisiana movie, and that would be Steel Magnolias.
Interesting. Not the water boy? Sorry. That's terrible.
Hi guys, I'm Aspen Collier. I'm an English teacher turned coding bootcamp student, and I also have no idea where movies are filmed. But the only movie I know that's filmed in Texas would be the home movies of my nephew doing awesome tricks.
That's cool.
I'm Kirsten Perry. I'm a data scientist in the energy industry, and I think Texas Chainsaw was already said. I only know two, and it's that one and Killer Joe, and I think Texas Chainsaw wins.
Fair enough. All right. David?
I'm David Wilson. I code for a living, and Apollo 13.
All right, that's a good one. That's a very good one. Angie, do you want to play?
I'm Angie Hayes. I do public health pediatric research for a living and also run the nonprofit y'all are about to hear about. And I think my favorite Texas movie is going to be Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to hear from you today, so I'm going to step down and get out of the way. If you'd like to come up here, how about a round of applause for Angie?
Am I in the right place? Do I fit in the screen here? So I'm going to start with giving you guys a little bit of information about who we are, Clinic Access Support Network. I sent this to a friend to check over right after I sent it to you. Order of operations here, I did that backwards. She was like, you didn't write the word abortion anywhere in your PowerPoint. Did you do that on purpose? And I was like, I forgot people don't know we do abortion because it's so ubiquitous for me. We do abortion services. We drive people to their abortion appointments. That is our primary function. Can you hit the first? Can I do it from here? Do you want to do it? Should I just hit? Yeah. So at this point, I started CSN 4 years ago because I saw a need that wasn't being filled, and so I just did it. Got together some friends and was like, we should help people. And they were like, that's a good idea. Then we incorporated, got our 501c3, created a nonprofit. And now we've grown from the 10 people we started with to approaching 100 volunteers. And we're structured as our board, which is still kind of small but growing. We have our dispatchers who talk to the patients about the needs they have and interface with our drivers. We have our trainers, so a group of people who help train new volunteers coming in, and we have follow-up calls. So we have a team of people who call people the day after their appointment and say, how are you feeling? Do you need anything else? Obviously, if they have medical questions, we say, here's the nurse line. We're not medical professionals. And we're what's called a practical support network. What that means is we provide transportation. Most of the time we're driving people. On rare occasion, we get them a lift into the clinic, but we always drive them home. We don't put them in any kind of public transportation going home. And we also buy bus tickets for people coming into Houston. Our service area is defined as anybody receiving services in the Houston area. So people coming into Houston, we get them bus tickets, we get them accommodation. We have a handful of volunteers with guest rooms. And if there aren't any guest rooms available, we buy them a hotel room for the night, make sure they have food, anything they need for their trip, that kind of stuff. We help them navigate the system. If somebody contacts us before they've contacted a clinic, we say, well, here's how this process is going to work. It's actually a 2-day thing. Many people don't know that going in. You have to go have an ultrasound done, wait 24 hours, and then go back for the procedure. So we give them a heads up about that. We give them a heads up that they can't drive themselves home from the procedure. A lot of them don't know that going in. So we help them figure those kinds of things out, and we also have doulas. Most people know of birth doulas, which is someone who provides emotional support for the pregnant person giving birth. We have what's called abortion doulas. So it's somebody who's much more trained in emotional support, kind of like a social worker, that kind of thing, and specifically in supporting someone having an abortion. So that's who we are and what we do. Here's how we do it. I tried to map the process so that we could look at the best way to create a solution. Right now we use multiple apps to try to make this work. I went through like a 6-month process of testing apps over and over and over, trying to find something that might kind of work. We ended up using multiples, and it's kind of awful. We spend an hour in our training trying to teach. Two of our tech support volunteers are in the back, trying to teach people how to use the tech, give them the FAQ afterwards, and they still get it wrong and ask us in the chat how to do it. We have a large number of retirees in our volunteer group as well, which can make it harder for some of them. Not always, not trying to be ageist. So the way it starts is a little small, I don't know if you can see it, but the patient contacts the hotline. Most of the time we do our entire hotline via text. It allows us to avoid mistakes like I wrote down the street wrong, or I wrote down their whatever piece of information wrong. If it's in text, we have it written and there's no way for us to screw it up. I like to try to remove human error wherever I can, because I know I'm full of making human errors along the way, so I try to mitigate that. Occasionally somebody will call and say, I can't text, please call me back. At that point we do call them back and talk to them over the phone, but on our voicemail it says, can we text you back? And so as long as they say yes, that's what we do. Our dispatchers, we actually have 10 people that dispatch for us. 5 of them work for a week and the other 5 take the week off, and then they switch the following week. That's a manner of self-care. We try to value self-care in our organization and not overburden the people that are helping us out. The dispatcher interfaces with the patient to figure out what their needs are, when their appointment is, where their appointment is, what time, where we need to pick them up, where we need to drop them off, all of that fun information. Then the dispatcher posts in both of our apps and says, in one app it gives the shift. We actually use a scheduling app that's designed for a restaurant to schedule their servers. And so what we do is we post, we call it a shift because that's what it is in the app and it makes it easier for people. We post a shift and we say at 9 a.m. this person, we use patient codes to respect privacy and things like that, but this person has an appointment at this clinic and they're coming from this side of town. And then we go and post within our chat to remind people to check that app because the push notifications on that app are glitchy. And so then our drivers go and they look at that app and then they take the information we've written in there and put it into their Google Maps to figure out where on the map that is if they don't know where 290 and Beltway is or that kind of thing. So they have to go map that on their own. And then if they're available on that day, that time for that drive, they sign up in the Sling app, in the scheduling app, and say, hey, I'm available, I can do this drive. At that point, the dispatcher sends the patient information to the driver. So the patient's phone number, the patient's name. We use WhatsApp because it's encrypted end-to-end to try to respect patient privacy. It's a thing that we're not necessarily governed by HIPAA, but since I do public health research for a living, I know a little bit about HIPAA, and so I try to use that to guide our actions with patient data. So within WhatsApp, our dispatcher sends the driver the patient's information. The driver contacts the patient, drives the patient the next day, and then we have a data entry person who goes through all of the apps and then opens up a Google Sheet and inputs the patient information into a Google Sheet, which is a horrific system. Really awful. But then our follow-up team calls that patient back the next day or texts them back. We always ask if the patient is willing to be interested in being checked on the next day. If they say no, we don't check on them. But if they say yes, we say, hey, how are you feeling? Are you doing okay? Is it okay if we ask you some demographic information? When we have demographic information, we can apply for grants better. And then if they had a ride to an ultrasound appointment, they repeat this entire process all over again, starting at the beginning. So that's the process of getting someone a ride to an abortion. So some of the back-end structure things, I've tried to do as much brainstorming and thinking through this as I could. I've spent probably 2 months trying to go through all of this from as many directions as I could. I'm definitely missing things because I'm not a tech person, and that's why I'm here. But the back-end structure, the things that I know we're going to need, we don't have an actual database. I would really love a database as opposed to having a person enter stuff into a Google spreadsheet, which is not necessarily all that secure. From that database, we would love to have customizable reports, who drove when and how often, so we can check on our volunteers if they haven't driven in a while, what kind of procedures are we driving to, what days are we driving the most often, things that will help us to be a more efficient organization and to provide our services better. And optimally, we would love to have a native app that we can use. From what I understand, what I've been told, it's easier to have a mobile optimized web interface. Is that accurate? I'm seeing a couple of nods. And so we're completely flexible and willing to like start with the web interface and get that going and then think about like an app long term. The other side of having a native app created is there are organizations all over the US who do what we do, and it's something that I would love to get a venture capitalist involved in and actually sell and make available to other organizations later on. So it's not just us here now in a microcosm. We would need it to preferably link to our website help request form. So one of the ways patients can contact us is to go to our website and fill out a form. I don't know if that would mean the form is embedded in the web thing y'all create, and we just embed that form into our website, or if it links to what's already there. That's definitely something I would need help with. Automated processes, we would love to be able to put in patient information, like just enter patient data, and then our system create a point on a map, create a message that contacts all of our volunteers and says there's something available that you'll need to go check and see if you can drive. All of the steps, many of the steps that our dispatchers have to take right now could easily be automated. They're pretty straightforward once the patient information is entered, as far as interacting with our drivers. And so we would love to see some of that automated to take the pressure off of them. Even with 5 dispatchers in a single week, they're putting in 10 hours of volunteer time in that week, which is kind of a lot of time. And it's 24/7. Patients message us at midnight. They message us at 6 a.m. At all hours. And they're often, not often, some of them are feeling stressed and emotionally distressed, and they need a lot of emotional support in that dispatch process. So taking some of the burden off the dispatchers in that side would be really fantastic. Grasshopper is the program that we use for our hotline. It's where we do our texting and where we intake calls and that kind of stuff, call out from. It is a new-ish program. It's been around for a few years, but their texting functionality was only rolled out about a year ago and has a lot of limitations, like it's not available on their web interface. So we can't just link an API and feed things like, because that would be fantastic. It's only available via the app. So the texting on that program is kind of iffy, but it's the program that fits in our budget. We run on a really small budget. Being a nonprofit that doesn't do a whole lot of paid direct service, we try not to run through people's money, as it were, and so that they have that available to donate to organizations that fund abortions. Can you hit the next slide? I would love to hear your feedback on this part of what I've just given you. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, so when you're doing the intake process and you're getting information from people,
Mhm.
you said that that's a point in time in which people are not only giving information, but they also might need some support. So the first thing that I thought about was how do you triage that process and use it like a text bot or some type of like chat bot that can get that information from them and or escalate them to a hotline or whatnot. Have you thought about that at all, that kind of automated procedure?
I have not, in part because of the limitations of Grasshopper. If that's a thing that can happen, would love to take some of that stress off of the dispatchers. Because we drive about 450 people in a year, and we have even more calls and texts than that. Not quite twice, maybe half again as much, from people saying, oh, I need help with this thing, I need help with this other thing, oh, I need a ride, never mind, I found my friend to drive me. So it's a lot of people to interface with.
Interesting.
Hey, Michelle's. Do one of y'all have a pen, or can I hand you my notebook? Will you write down some of the stuff that's coming out from here? Do you need a notebook, or are you good? You good? Cool, thanks. Yeah.
So when the calls first come in and the dispatchers are taking that initial information, where are they capturing that initial information that has to later be entered into?
It generally just sits in the chat, in the text chat with that person. We try to stick with a case manager approach. If I'm the one who answers this first text, I interact with that person, that patient, all the way through their entire experience. Except for the follow-up, because we have someone different that follows up, because one of their questions is, did you feel comfortable with the dispatcher? So.
Or if it's, we switch on Sundays.
Yeah, we have specific handoff people, so Gina switches with Mandy on Sundays. So a patient that she scheduled who has an appointment on Monday, Mandy would take over. The patient would not know, because it all comes from the same phone number. So Mandy just pretends to be Gina until that's done.
Are there names associated with the conversation, or?
As far as the dispatcher and the patient,
Yeah.
their names are within the chat, because we want the driver to be able to say, hey, Sarah, I'm here, or I'm Angie, and I'm gonna drive you to your appointment tomorrow, to make it a little bit more personal.
Right.
But we don't use their names anywhere other than sending it directly to the driver. Within our scheduling app, we use a patient number. We pull a number from their phone number and use that as a patient code.
And where would you say the bottleneck is? Did I interrupt something? Where would you say the bottleneck is when you're saying that the dispatchers are overwhelmed? Because from the numbers you gave, it sounds like about 2 calls a day. Is that right?
450
It fluctuates wildly.
It's very
We'll
It comes in
drive
waves, maybe?
60 people in 1 month, and we'll drive 25 people the next month. And it's generally 6 to 8 weeks after a holiday when we get really busy.
Okay. And you'd say the bottlenecks are like all in that upfront part of the process where there's the initial like conversation starting, or like where?
It's kind of through the whole process.
The whole process is cumbersome.
Partly because there's no predictable, like, what word am I looking for? The way that we find rides for the patients is itself unpredictable, because we don't keep track of our volunteers' schedules necessarily, because they're doing it for free and they're doing it on their own time with their own cars, and so we don't try to pressure our volunteers into like, hey, I know you're free right now, you need to go pick up this patient.
Right.
So you put a queue. You put the patient on a queue, and then the driver pulls the patient from the queue and then claims that as like, I'm going to go drive this person.
Yes.
And that queue is on the Google Sheet.
No, that's on the scheduling app.
That
The restaurant
schedule-
scheduling app.
The restaurant scheduling app.
I see. Okay.
We create a drive to the clinic shift and a drive home from the clinic shift, because occasionally we have different drivers that do that. You know, somebody's available in the morning but not in the afternoon.
So the volunteer drivers log on to this scheduling app, and they see a queue, and they can just claim
Correct.
that I'm going to drive this. I see. And you're saying that is not predictable? Or?
That's a kind of nasty little not. We have been trying to fix since we started. We've gone through 4 or 5 iterations of the process of trying to schedule drives. Part of it has been as we grow, our previous process didn't work anymore. And then part of it has been just a growth in more awareness of trying to keep patient data safe and that kind of stuff. And our current apps, I went through, did I say this already? Like 6 months of just testing every app I could find. And this was the best we could find.
Like the least bad.
The least bad, that's a really good way to say it.
And
The
so
least
you're,
terrible.
what I'm hearing is that you wouldn't be sad if like another solution took the place of this.
I would be ecstatic.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that you're not required to follow HIPAA, from my understanding. How important is it that you guys do, like as a personal preference? Because when I hear HIPAA, and I'm thinking like very strict regulations on patient data, that makes me think that a lot of your stuff might have to be very custom, because it's gonna need to be locked down just for like your, so that way like only, you know, like I hear we need a custom server with our data and a custom app that like, you know, they like only our drivers after they've been vetted or whatever can download and get access to. So
I wouldn't really care who downloaded it, but
Okay.
as far as getting access to
Right.
would be that's actually, I have a slide on security
Right.
next.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking like, yeah, there's like that trade-off between
Yeah.
like, you know, how much do you want to try to emulate HIPAA and locking down data slash like, you know, are you, I mean, people joke about all the hoops you have to jump through in like hospital systems, right, to like get IT on board or something.
So the basic data management approach to HIPAA, which is a little bit different than like what you would see your doctor doing when they're putting your information into the EMR. The data management side is more, there's a need to know requirement. If you don't need to know this patient's name, you don't get to know the patient's name. If you're doing a thing, if you're on the callback team and you need to know the patient's name and phone number, you get to know the patient's name and phone number. Encryption and also a paper trail, as it were, an electronic paper trail that can be audited. What information was added, deleted, moved, anything like that. Those are the 3 biggest pieces that we try to follow, that we take from HIPAA and apply to what we're doing, which is pretty much all of the data management side of HIPAA. Yeah.
Is there a standard set of questions and minimum number of the questions that we have to collect these particular data points for each initial dispatch call, or is the chat way more open-ended than that?
Well, yes, there's a specific set of questions that have to be answered. We even have taken time to determine the best way to ask those questions, the best order to ask them in. However, dealing with people is always unpredictable, which means when they call our hotline, some of them listen to the instructions in the voicemail and leave the information that we need in the voicemail, and some of them don't. So then we would be pulling information from 2 sources. There is a text version of the voicemail available, so that information could be pulled from there. So it's still written, but
So they always initially get to voicemail before they actually talk to?
Most people call the voicemail first. They're told at the clinic that they can text us, they can go online and fill out a form, they can email us, they can message us on Facebook. Any point of contact, there's no wrong point of contact for us. Any way you get in touch with us, we will find a way to help you. Because we want to make the burden as light as possible for them in getting that help. But yeah, the number of directions that they follow in listening to the voicemail and information that they leave varies by patient.
So to be clear, you do work directly with clinics?
Yes.
So clinics
I
refer
go to
people
Planned Parenthood a
to...
couple of times a year and I train their staff on what we do.
Okay.
And what our capacity is and how we want them to talk to patients about us, and who to give our information to. A couple of our board members work at Houston Women's Clinic, which is the highest volume clinic in Houston. That's 80 95% of our drives because they're the counselors there. 2 of them are counselors there, and so they can speak directly to it. To their
Okay,
patients.
so it's not a thing where patients have to come and seek you out. They
Some do.
right there.
Some find us online, and that's data we're now collecting. We've just started our follow-up and data collection process. It's a grand total of 1 week old right now. But that's a point that we're collecting so that we can know better how to reach out. Yeah.
Are you collecting any data around what the point of origin, so where
Yeah.
these people are coming from?
That is a data point we're collecting.
Okay, cool.
Because I want to know how we can do a better job of what we're doing. Are more people calling voicemail first, text first, web form first? I'm a data hog. I do data for a living, so data collection for a living.
What about where they live?
Yeah, geographically.
Yeah.
That's also.
Okay,
We're,
yeah,
we're
sorry.
collecting zip code, which technically violates HIPAA. HIPAA says you can only have the first 3 numbers of a zip code for it to be considered de-identified data. But we're also in Google Sheets, and there's a whole bunch of. So we go with zip code. We don't keep their exact address recorded, but I feel like zip code gives us a close enough idea of where on the map we should pay attention to.
Sure.
Are we ready? All right, more. Let's go. All right, so these are security things that I've thought of. My partner works in IT security and helped me think through some of this. That does not mean this is complete, and it is very flexible. End-to-end encryption, I think I mentioned that a minute ago when you were asking about it, is something that we would really like to have. At very least, encryption at the ends if it's not end-to-end encryption. We would need individual logins, and from what I understand, a federated authentication would be an easier way to create an individual login, because then I could go in and say, this email address is allowed to access my program. Then they would have to log in with that. Role-based access control, so the need to know process of the callback person on Tuesday only needs to know who had an appointment on Monday and nothing else, as opposed to having access to our entire data sheet of everybody we've contacted. That would be really, really fantastic to be able to control who can see what in what places, and being able to track user logins and use. So when we see a patient, or excuse me, a driver or one of our volunteers hasn't logged into the system in like a month and a half, and they didn't tell us up front, like, hey, I'm going out of the country for 6 weeks, they just kind of ghosted us, then we can follow up with them and be like, it's totally cool if life circumstances change, but as far as safety, we want to take you off the program if you're not going to drive. And so usually they say, oh, my bad, and they drive the next week. But it's usually how that conversation goes. But those are some of the security ideas I've come up with. I mean, the next slide is a hey question slide. I don't know if you want to leave this up or go to the question slide, but what are y'all's thoughts on these things and other ways to do this better?
I mean, this is all pretty straightforward. Would you be open to things like, instead of you manually going in and seeing who's overdue from logging in, just automatically having triggers that would email them or something?
That'd be real great.
So there's room there to like interpret what we're talking
I
about.
work full time. I'm working on a double master's and I run CASN. So if you can automate something for me, my answer is yes.
How many roles do you? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
How many roles do you envision? It seems like you need a master administrator role who can see everything, a driver role or a dispatcher role that can see certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Would that driver and dispatcher role see different things?
Yes.
Okay.
The dispatcher would have access to input patient data. The driver would not. And the driver would not have access to see patient data until they've been assigned to a patient.
Sure.
And that's one of the automated processes I would love is this driver says, hey, I want to drive this patient. The system says, here's the patient information. So instead of our dispatchers having to send that information to them.
Are there other roles that you anticipate?
The callback person would need a different kind of access. Like I said, accessing only, you know, if this person does callbacks on Tuesday, they only need Monday's patients. Can y'all think of any other roles?
Can people serve multiple roles? Or do you
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, everybody does everything when you're a small nonprofit. Yeah, all of our dispatchers at this point are also drivers. Our board members are also dispatchers, trainers, and drivers.
How do you get your board to do that? That's great.
I require, we just say we're a working board. If you want to join us, you're going to put in some hours. Come on. So, can y'all think of any other roles that would be?
No, but I guess one small detail I'm going to add is that if a driver applies for a shift or says I can drive this patient, I think we would want to have the dispatcher for that patient first approve that application before the driver gets to see that patient.
Right. That helps us a little bit with regulating who's driving how much. We have the overachievers that are like, I'll take that one, I'll take that one, I'll take that one, and then they're burned out in a month and never drive for us again. So we try to limit that, and we say, hey, I know you're free tomorrow, but let's let this other person drive because they haven't driven in 6 weeks.
Does anybody not show up for the drive? Like, do people say I'm going to drive somebody and then they don't
On
show up?
rare occasion that happens. Happened yesterday, as a matter of fact. But I think that's the second or third time it's happened in 4 years.
Oh, okay.
And that was somebody took cold medicine and didn't wake up.
For a while, right? Not
They did
period.
eventually wake up,
Okay.
just not on time. And the first time that happened was alcohol and not waking up to their alarm. So, on rare occasion it happens, but thankfully it's not been often.
So when you have so you said that the drivers like go pick which one they want to drive. Have you guys, and because you mentioned that you've tried a bunch of different systems, so maybe you've already done this, like, have you guys, is it set up so that like, it's like, hey, I'm available to drive from 9 a.m. to 12, and then the dispatcher like decides which ones within those drive?
So that idea is a thing that we're playing with, that we're interested in implementing, but our current system makes it harder to do.
Right.
And so yes, it's a thing we would want to look at for this programming.
Okay, because I think that would be possible where like it would automatically pick drivers like within the appropriate area. You could probably automate it to where like, it would send something to the dispatcher like, hey, such and such is closest, but they've also driven like 15 hours this week, so maybe they should show.
So fantastic.
Yeah. You have to take a sleep shift.
Yeah.
How would the liability waivers fit into this?
That's on the next slide. So we have a liability waiver. Currently it is a Google form with branching logic, so that we have it in English and Spanish for minors and for people who are not minors, with a million different pieces to it. And we just use a statement that says, I agree that typing my name here is my electronic signature. If you hit next twice, it'll say signature collection. Because something that I've been told is that it's really fairly simple. I don't know what that means on your end. To create a click this button and sign with your finger thing, which would be really great for that waiver thing. It would be really great because then we have an actual signature. But we do have the advantage of being a small nonprofit, and if we were to go to court, we've put forth a reasonable effort within our means, and the judge would rule favorably in that sense. So, from the research I've done and lawyers I've talked to.
I don't mean to go back 2 steps, but why would somebody take you to court?
No idea.
Just-
Did we get in an accident and they want like medical bills paid? Like, you can't get blood from a stone, but we're a nonprofit, which means my name is on there as a director, and if we can't pay for it, it's coming out of my paycheck. Which is why I bug everybody about waivers all the time, because my name is on it. Sure. It's my paycheck on the line.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, so if there's an accident, if somebody has a medical emergency afterwards and we don't get them to the hospital quick enough, they feel that it's negligence, they might want to sue. There are a lot of different ways when you're dealing with driving, high stress situations, medical procedures that abortion, driving minors to an abortion if they haven't been emancipated for the procedure can be filed as a kidnapping charge. So there's a lot of fun things that we deal with, and we do the best we can to mitigate risk. Obviously you cannot eliminate risk, but we do everything we can to mitigate those risks and be aware of them up front, so.
Is it just one waiver at each step?
They just sign one waiver. We have them sign it on their way to the clinic because oftentimes on the way home, they are still partially sedated and it wouldn't be valid in court. But the way it's worded, it says my driver, like parentheses S. So if one person drives them there, that waiver still covers the other driver taking them home. Yeah.
You could probably have that baked in to where they can't schedule, they won't be scheduled until the waiver's.
So we actually have to have the patient sign it in the presence of the driver, so that we can say this is actually the person who did it, and the patient can't say, oh, well, my boyfriend got that text and filled that out for me, I didn't actually sign the waiver.
So like,
Otherwise, we would have to have them upload a picture of their ID and a picture of themselves, and then it turns into a lot of stuff I don't want to be accountable for.
so you like, like say if it's like a mobile app, you like for the driver to be like, all right, here's a waiver, and they're like,
That's currently what it is. The driver opens the mobile app on their, or the Google form on their phone, just in a web interface, hands it to the patient clicks through all the things, they say yes, if they say no, they're taken to an error page and says, sorry, get out of the car unless you change your mind. They go back and say yes through all the questions they're supposed to, and then it's by typing your name, you're agreeing that this is your electronic signature, they type their name, then the driver, it instructs them to give it back to the driver is instructed to back up and make sure the patient information is in and correct, and then the driver also signs that they've checked that information.
or just something simplified that logic like you said.
It's a pretty straightforward branching logic process. I mean, Google Forms can do the branching logic, it's real simple. I don't know if y'all have heard of RedCap, it's a longitudinal data collection monster from hell. And I do a lot of like programming and arranging in that for my job. And so Google Forms is real simple branching logic. If Google Forms can do it,
But
it's easy.
it would, our drivers and dispatchers, including myself, forget all the time to ask the patient to sign the waiver before we start driving. So if there was some way where we could
Or a
have
reminder.
like push notifications or just automatic something.
Like if it's a native app, a reminder that pops up at 8:30 for a 9 a.m. appointment on the driver's phone that says, don't forget to have your patient fill
Or
out
if
the
it's
waiver.
not a native app, that it's something, send a text with the link to the
Mhm.
waiver.
We have a preview form, and we ask the dispatchers to send the preview form ahead of time while they're chatting with the patient that says, hey, your driver's gonna ask you to sign this. So hopefully the patient will go, hey, wasn't I supposed to sign something if the driver forgets? But it's a whole lot of human error possibility kind of thing that we would love to have extra accountability for. Yeah.
Quick question, this Google form is in a share? Where's this Google form at? Where do you store it at?
We use G Suite for our emails,
Okay.
and so it's just inside that linked to our business email. G Drive, yeah. Not terribly secure.
Okay, do you work off a domain-based environment or is it workstation environment?
Help me out, I don't know the terminology.
Well,
What's the difference between
I
the two?
mean, do you log into a user account on your computers?
Other than logging into Google, no. So the only things that we have to log into are Google, and I do the website design.
Okay.
It's real simple, it's not actual coding, it's like drag and drop stuff, which is why it's real special.
You're
if
thinking
you
about
go check
Active
it out.
Directory?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like they'd have anything like that.
They would not have. Active Directory is more secure.
Yeah, that seems like
You can just
security
use,
equals.
you can use Google Auth though, if they're using G Suite, just use OAuth for all the authentication stuff.
Which, in case you're wondering, Google Sheets OAuth does not talk to RedCap. I tried that for like 3 days straight to make my job easier, and it would not talk to it. Push notifications, if it's a native app or if it's a web interface, maybe, like she mentioned, a text message that gets sent as a reminder, as whatever else we need as a contact point.
To the drivers?
Drivers preferably.
Yeah.
I don't really see a need for that going to patients. It could be a thing that might come up later, but as it stands, I don't see a need for pushing to
And
patients.
what about any sort of notification back to dispatchers, like a driver having accepted a
Yeah.
job, or, okay, so
That would be
just mainly
handy.
between
Yeah.
dispatchers?
Internally, this is an internal approach. The patients wouldn't have a need to download an app to get a ride once. I mean, there are people we've driven 4 times in 4 years, but even that, do you need to download an app for one thing? And oftentimes it's sensitive information. They don't necessarily want others to know. They don't want a big abortion app sitting on their phone. So, like, even if it's our cute little like GeoPoint butterfly, it's still, you know. And then another thing is maps. So right now I said our driver has to go into the scheduling app, look at, hey, it's at this intersection, go to the maps, look at where that intersection is, and determine if that's something they can do. Because our dispatchers already do so much, I can't really ask the dispatchers to go get a Google link, a Google Maps link, and stick it into this thing, because that's just too much. And so I would love for the interface for our drivers to be, they open it up and the first thing they see is a map of Houston with little blue dots, radius 5 miles, of where the patients are located, so that they can very easily see, oh, that's the other side of town from where I am, or that's next door to me, or without having to go and look that up. So, I think that's all the things on this page. What else?
So the drivers do not have the physical address until they...
Correct.
Okay, so they're just seeing it by the zip code?
No, we give them intersection, like
59 and whatever.
right, like my house is near 610 and 59 South. So that's how we would label that, 610 and 59 South. It's a nice broad area so that we're keeping the patient information safe, because the scheduling app is not terribly secure.
Dispatcher picks an intersection?
The dispatcher goes and looks, gets the address, maps it, picks an intersection. Yeah, it's a real pain in the ass.
So maybe what we could do instead is have like the dispatcher put in the address and then automatically it just blows up the radius.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's
so-
what the driver sees.
Yeah, something that you could do automatically is
That's the-
send it out to Google and get the latitude and longitude,
Mhm.
and then run like a jitter on it, which takes a decimal point way deep and changes it. So it basically just moves the point randomly in a direction a few blocks away. And that would be, I don't know why I'm going on and on.
You can do that, you can still draw a radius also.
Exactly,
Yeah,
but it could
just
be a
the
little
blue
more.
circle, like,
Yeah.
like when you open Google Maps on your phone and it's like, I don't really know where you are, here's a big blue circle, that's about what we're thinking.
Right.
Or you could have it to where if you, because the dispatcher is seeing the address, right?
Correct.
So what you could do is you have these known addresses that are known to like this subset of people.
Mhm.
You could ask them, okay, what's the intersection that you have for this, and you could like have some type of way to store that. So like the system will automatically just pull like a preferred intersection for that. So that way you're not having to ask them over and over again. If that makes sense.
You mean asking the patients?
Or asking the dispatcher. So like, let's say, you know, I'm a dispatcher and I know of this address here. And I can just say, oh, this is 59 South in the Beltway. Well, rather than having to ask me every single time, like, what, you know, this is the address, maybe there's a way to securely store that. So that way, like, the system will match up, like, that
Yeah.
address with 59
Yeah.
in the Beltway.
Absolutely. Yeah, y'all are the experts on this for sure. Whatever way is the most effective way to do that. So not giving the driver the exact address, giving them a 4-ish mile radius. Yes, however you say to do that, yeah.
And right now, with the process of the drivers finding, you know, what the needs are they having to log in on their own in order to check that, or are they getting information pushed to them at all at this from the dispatchers?
So the dispatch gets all the information. Once they have all the information, they go to the scheduling app, create the schedules, then they go back to the messaging app, they message the drivers and say, hey, go check the scheduling app, because the push notifications don't always work on that app. Then they open that up, they get a general area where the patient is, they go look at Google Maps, they check their calendar. So it's kind of a gnarly process. Yeah.
So you mentioned that they have this intersection, which is like a radius of the actual building. How do you know, like, what if I'm driving in like, I mean, you know, there are some places in Houston where like, you know, like there's like a building and there's like just that one driveway to get to the building and everything else is like, you know, road, cars going like probably like 50 miles an hour, even though we're not on the highway for some reason, right? How do you handle like, what if the driver's like, hey, you know, I'm supposed to drop them off, you know, somewhere, but it's not really a safe location to like.
The driver gets the exact address once they
Except.
accept that drive.
Okay.
The thing that we need de-identified is before the driver
Before the
accepts
driver
it,
accepts it.
so that I don't have 100 drivers knowing where every single patient lives, because the drivers who don't have locks on their screens and leave their phone out, and their daughter-in-law is super conservative, and like it's a really easy path down to people having too much access to information. So it's just the general driver group we want to have this big radius, and then the driver who takes that shift would have the exact address.
I guess kind of as a corollary to that, I don't know if there's a way off the top of my head to have your app like require login each time it's opened, but that might, if it's possible, that might be useful then to get away around people who, you know, they don't
Into
use
phones are
service.
locked and yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Other than some really, really bad drawings in a notebook on some ideas for like user interface, that's everything I have. So, yeah.
I know because I did this maybe an alert like 30 minutes before like push notifications are important. I know from my first time I took a nap and then I got some phone calls and woke up because my first drop off was in Hempstead from London.
Is that in Texas?
Barely. Brenham, I think, is the farthest place we always drive to because there's not really a bus option from Brenham, and it's 99 miles from the clinic, which means they have to have 2 appointments because you have to be over 100 miles away to have your ultrasound and appointment in one day. That is Brenham is my favorite.
We did a College Station ride.
Yeah, we did that recently too. A lot of times from farther out, Beaumont, College Station, we buy bus tickets in and pick them up at the bus station. But sometimes the bus schedule is just absolute shit. It's like there's one bus coming in today and it's at 6 p.m. So we're gonna bus them in, get them a hotel, take them, put them in another hotel that night, and then send them home. And so we try to find drivers when that's the thing that happens. So, yeah.
Would any of the drivers ever have some sort of request like they could only be in a particular area of town?
That's a thing we would love to look into. If a driver has there's no way I'm driving outside this radius, like I really try to avoid driving outside the loop when I can, you know, I'm that person. So if a driver has a preferred radius and I absolutely will not drive outside this radius, that would be great to have access to, and also like availability. I'm usually available Monday morning, so a patient that has a need on Monday morning, those are the drivers that are pinged first. And then if there's no response within some set amount of time, it pings the rest of the drivers. Would be a really cool way to do that.
Alternatively, have it ping out to everybody, and if it's getting down to the wire and this person needs a ride, because right now what we're dealing with is some, I don't want to say apathy, but less engaged.
It's overload in messages, and so they turn off the messaging, the notifications on the app.
Which is why I was thinking like if you could weed some out so they would.
Which is why I was saying
ones,
only
yeah.
ping first and then ping wider after a certain amount of time, because it would reduce the number of notifications they get. And then part of our problem with that notification overload is no matter how many times we say it in our group chat, please message your dispatcher directly. Someone will get on the group chat and ask a question that should have been asked of their dispatcher correctly, and then 3 other people will respond to that question that are not the dispatcher. No matter how many times. So it gets to be a lot sometimes. Yeah. So.
Well, cool. So we are here until 8 p.m. So we've got 45 minutes to talk with Angie, to brainstorm ideas, to work on whatever you'd like to work on, continue work on specific projects. So we can kind of break up into smaller groups and get this going.
Cool.
Awesome. How about a round of applause for Angie? And just in case you didn't know, we are on Slack at sketchcity.herokuapp.com, and we have a big long URL there for project ideas. So there's a bunch of different projects within this one project that could be built out as separate components and could be coordinated like a symphony. So I heard at least 5 different projects in here that we can start to outline.
And I think I'm going to go in and create a channel in Slack specifically for